Hey guys, welcome to day 1 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies. Today we are making my classic peanut butter cookies. These are very similar to the ones where you add the Hershey Kiss in the top, which you can absolutely do, but I like jazzing them up a little bit by dipping them in chocolate and adding chopped nuts, sprinkles, you name it. They are perfectly sweet, tender, and of course packed full of peanut butter flavor. So let's go get started. So in the bowl of my stand mixer here, I am creaming together a half a cup of butter that is softened, along with a half a cup of sugar and a half a cup of brown sugar. And we just want to mix that together until it's nice and creamy. And then I'm going to add in a half a cup of creamy peanut butter, 1 egg, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and we just want to beat this together, scraping the sides and bottom of the bowl in between until everything is nice and smooth. And then I'm going to add in 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking soda, a half a teaspoon of baking powder, and 1.5 cups of flour. Again, we just want to mix that together. And then I have my parchment lined baking sheet here. And then we are going to shape them into 1-inch balls and roll them into some more granulated sugar and place them on our sheet pan about 2 inches apart. And then I'm going to take a fork and press into the tops of the cookies in both directions so you get that little grid pattern. If you are going to add the Hershey's Kisses to these, then I would skip that step and just leave them as balls, and you add the Hershey Kisses right at the end while they're still hot. So once we have that crosshatch shape into all of the cookies, we are going to bake them at 375 degrees for about 8 to 12 minutes, or until the edges are light golden brown. They will still seem soft in the middle, but you want to take them out because they will continue to cook on the sheet pan. So I like to leave them on the pan for about 5 minutes before moving them to wire racks to cool. And then once they're cooled, I have some melted chocolate that I mixed with a little bit of oil to make it thinner. And I'm just going to dip half of the cookies in and then sprinkle on some chopped peanuts and sprinkles. I love being able to decorate these with lots of different colors so that when I'm making cookie boxes to give out to people, they're just really bright and cheerful. I really hope you enjoyed coming along with me for day 1 of our 12 days of Christmas cookies. I will be posting a new cookie recipe every other day in the month of December, so be sure to stay tuned, subscribe so you don't miss any, and I will also be posting other videos in between all these cookies, so definitely keep an eye out, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Bye. Hey guys, welcome back to day 2 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies. Today we are making my cranberry white chocolate oatmeal cookies. Classic chewy cookies studded with tart cranberries and creamy white chocolate. They taste and look festive and are always a favorite. So let's go get started. So in the bowl of my stand mixer here, I have 1 stick of butter at room temperature, and to that I am adding in a half a cup of sugar and a half a cup of brown sugar, and we're just going to cream that together until it's nice and smooth. And then to that I am going to add in 1 large egg, and we just want to scrape the sides and the bottom of the bowl every once in a while just to make sure it's all nice and incorporated. Along with 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and then to that I'm going to add in a half a teaspoon of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of baking soda, a half a teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 3/4 of a cup of flour, and 1.5 cups of old-fashioned oats. And we just want to give that a gentle stir one more time. And I will note that you really should mix all of your dry ingredients first and then pour them into the wet ingredients. It's a bad habit of mine. I am trying to be better. They always come out just fine when I do it this way, but I know, especially if you're new to baking, I would recommend mixing all of the dry ingredients on the side. Shame on me. Next video, I will be doing the dry ingredients first. And then I like to take it off of the mixer and use a spatula to mix in the cranberries and chocolate so that they don't break apart. So I'm adding in 1 cup of white chocolate chips and 1 cup of dried cranberries, and we're just going to fold that together. And I like to refrigerate this dough for about a half an hour to an hour just to firm things up a little bit so they don't spread as much. And then I'm just scooping out 1.5 to 2 tablespoon balls of dough and lightly pressing them on my parchment lined baking sheet. And this is optional, but if you want them to look a little bit prettier, you can put some more chocolate chips and dried cranberries into the top of the cookies. And I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees, and we are just going to bake these for about 10 to 12 minutes or until the edges are slightly golden brown. And we just want to let them cool on the pan for about 5 minutes, and they will just continue to cook a little bit there without getting too overdone. And if you do have 2 sheet pans of cookies going into the oven at the same time, make sure that halfway through you rotate the pan so that they cook nice and evenly. And after that 5 minutes is up on the sheet pan, I move them to my wire rack to cool completely. Thank you so much for coming along on day 2 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. If you love oatmeal cookies, you will really love these. It's just an elevated classic that's just a little bit more special for Christmas time. We will see you the day after tomorrow with day 3. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. Hey everyone, today we are making my butterscotch toffee shortbread cookies for day 3 of our 12 days of Christmas cookies. These shortbread cookies are buttery, flaky, filled with sweet, crunchy toffee bits and creamy butterscotch chips. Perfect with a cold cup of milk or a nice hot cup of coffee. And really easy to make, so let's go get started. So in the bowl of my stand mixer, I have 1 1/4 cups of butter softened, and I'm adding in 1/2 cup of powdered sugar, and we just want to cream that together, along with 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then once that's nice and fluffy, we are going to add in 1 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 1/2 cup of cornstarch, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And we just want to give that a good mix. That's the other great thing about this recipe is it is egg-free. So if anybody you know has an egg allergy, this is a really great option. And this dough will be crumbly. So then we just want to stir in 1 cup of butterscotch chips. You can slightly chop it up if you prefer, and 1/2 cup of toffee bits. And we just want to give that a stir. And then I have a piece of plastic wrap down on the counter here, and I'm going to put the dough on top and form it into a 3-inch in diameter log. And you just want to really try and press this together because again it is crumbly, and we're going to refrigerate this for a while so that it'll help the dough kind of stick together. So once it's formed, again we're just going to wrap it up tightly in the plastic and refrigerate it for at least an hour. I like to even do it overnight, just to make sure that it's really nice and firm and easily sliced. So once it is nice and firm, we are going to take it out of the refrigerator and preheat our oven to 350 degrees, and using a sharp knife we are going to cut the dough into 1/4-inch slices and place on sheet pans lined with parchment paper about 2 inches apart. And then we're going to bake them for about 10 to 12 minutes or until they're just lightly golden brown on the edges. And then we just want to allow them to cool on the pan for 5 minutes before transferring to a wire rack. And there you have it, my butterscotch toffee shortbread cookies. I am a big fan of shortbread, so I do have one other shortbread cookie recipe coming up later on in this series, but I hope you are all enjoying the 12 days of Christmas cookies so far. If you've given any of them a try, please let me know what you think and what your favorite one is. And thank you so much for watching. We will see you in the next one. Bye. Hey guys, welcome back to day 4 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies. Today we are making my red velvet crinkle cookies. These are like little mini red velvet cakes. They're so soft, fluffy, and coated in sweet powdered sugar. Plus they have that beautiful red pop of color that is so very festive for the holidays. So let's go get started. So in the bowl of my stand mixer, I have a half a cup of butter softened, and I'm adding in 3/4 of a cup of sugar and a half a cup of brown sugar. And we just want to cream that together until it's light and fluffy. And then we are going to add in 2 large eggs and give that another good mix, scraping the bottom and sides of the bowl as we go. And then to that I'm going to add in 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, and about 1.5 tablespoons of red food coloring. This is going to look very, very red, but it's going to get diluted with the flour and cocoa powder. And then we also want to add in 1.5 tablespoons of milk. So we're just going to give that a really good stir until everything is incorporated. And in a separate large bowl, I'm going to combine 2 cups of flour, 1/3 a cup of cocoa powder, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then we are going to slowly add that into our wet mixture. And then we just want to stir that until everything is incorporated, but not over mix it. And then we are just going to cover that and refrigerate for at least 1 hour or until it's nice and firm. And then I'm going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees, and we just want to roll the dough into 1.5 to 2 inch balls. And then I have a half a cup of powdered sugar that we are just going to roll the balls in and then place on parchment lined baking sheet about 2 inches apart. And then we just want to bake those for about 12 minutes or until they are slightly crispy on the edges. And again, we're just going to cool them on the pan for 5 minutes before moving to a wire rack to cool. And there you have it, my red velvet crinkle cookies. I really hope you guys enjoyed coming along for day 4 to make these. Red velvet cake is a big thing in my family. My mom makes it for all of our birthdays, so this always just gives me that little reminder of that. And again, they're just so festive for Christmas time. If you give them a try, please be sure to leave me a comment and let me know what you think, and we will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye. Hey everyone, welcome back to day 5 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies. Today we are making my molasses spice cookies. These are a classic, and for a reason. They are filled with wonderful warm spices, soft, chewy, perfectly sweet with that crunchy sugar on the top. We've been making these since I was little, so they are a must. And they just always remind me of the holidays. So let's go get started. So in the bowl of my stand mixer, I have 1 cup of butter softened, and I'm adding in 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar, and we just want to cream that together. And then I'm adding in 1/3 a cup of molasses. And one tip is anytime you're using something sticky like molasses or honey, spray the container that you're pouring it out of with a little bit of cooking spray and it'll slide right out. So we just want to scrape the sides and the bottom of the bowl. Give that a mix, and then we're going to add in 1 egg and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And again, we just want to give that a good mix, scraping the bowl in between. And then in a large bowl, I am combining 2.5 cups of flour, 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of ground ginger, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/4 teaspoon of cloves, or you could use 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice, which I like to do because I always have these big jars of pumpkin pie spice and never use it up before they expire. And then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We just want to give that a good stir. And then we are going to add that into our wet ingredients in our mixer. And then we want to just mix that until combined. And then we are going to cover this and chill for at least 1 hour. I oftentimes take it and put it in plastic wrap so that I can wash my mixing bowl and make another batch of cookie dough if I need to. But we just want to make sure this gets a little bit firmer and not so sticky. So once the dough is nice and chilled, I am preheating my oven to 350 degrees and lining 2 sheet pans with parchment paper. And then I'm going to roll the dough into 1.5 to 2 inch balls, and then roll that in granulated sugar. I have about 1/2 cup in a bowl here. And we just want to place them about 2 inches apart on our baking sheet. And then we just want to bake them for about 10 to 12 minutes, rotating the pans halfway through until they're just nice and slightly golden on the outside and set in the middle. And then we just want to leave them on the sheet pan for about 5 minutes to cool before transferring them to a wire rack to cool completely. And there you have it, my molasses spice cookies. I hope you enjoyed coming along and making them with me, and that you are enjoying the 12 days of Christmas cookies so far. We have lots of great recipes coming up for the rest of the month. And thank you so much for watching to the end, and we will see you in the next one. Bye. Hey guys, welcome back to day 6 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies. Today we are making my maraschino cherry shortbread cookies. If you like chocolate covered cherries, you will love these. The most buttery, tender shortbread cookie filled with chopped up maraschino cherries and mini chocolate chips. They are not only incredibly delicious, but really pretty to look at and definitely have a nice pop of color that looks great in a box full of cookies. And they are super easy to make, so let's go get started. So in the bowl of my stand mixer here, I have 1 cup of butter softened, and I'm mixing that with 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. And we just want to stir that until everything is nice and light and fluffy. And then I'm going to add in 1/2 tablespoon of vanilla extract. And then once that is combined, we are going to add in 2 cups of flour and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now I have 1 cup of maraschino cherries that I drained, chopped, and dried on a towel, just because you don't want them to be wet or the whole dough will turn kind of pinkish red. So we're going to add those in along with 2/3 a cup of chocolate chips. I like to use the mini chocolate chips so that the shortbread cookies don't fall apart as easily when you're slicing them. They just incorporate in a lot better. So we just want to mix that until it's combined, and then I am going to form the dough into a log and wrap it in plastic wrap, and you want to refrigerate that for at least 2 hours so it becomes nice and firm and easy to slice. And then we're just going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees and cut the dough into 1/4 inch slices. And then I have 2 sheet pans lined with parchment paper that we are going to place the cookies on about 2 inches apart and bake for about 10 to 12 minutes or until the edges are just lightly golden brown. And we'll leave those on the sheet pan for about 5 minutes to cool before moving to a wire rack. I've been making these for about the last 5 years now. I had a jar of maraschino cherries that were just sitting in my fridge one year, so I decided to make them like I do my butterscotch shortbread, and they are just perfection, especially if you like chocolate covered cherries. Thank you so much for coming along on day 6. I hope you're enjoying the recipes so far, and thank you for watching to the end, and we will see you in the next one. Bye. Hey guys, welcome back to day 7 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies. Today we are making my soft and chewy gingerbread cookies. The name really says it all. These babies are so unbelievably soft and chewy. They're almost like little cakes, filled with warm spices and molasses and dipped in a sweet, sticky glaze. So let's go get started. So in a large bowl here, I am combining 4 cups of flour with 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ginger, 1/4 teaspoon of cloves, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And we just want to whisk that all together and set it aside. And then in the bowl of my stand mixer, I have 1/2 cup of butter softened, and to that I am adding in 3/4 cup of brown sugar, and we're just going to cream that together until it's light and fluffy. And then I am adding in 1/2 cup of molasses, 1 large egg, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and a 1/4 cup of water, and we just want to mix that until everything is incorporated, scraping the bottom and sides of the bowl in between. And then once that is all combined, we are going to add in our dry ingredients. So then once that is all combined, we are going to cover it or wrap it in plastic wrap and chill in the refrigerator for at least 2 hours, if not overnight. And then when we are ready to bake the cookies, we're going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. And we're going to roll the dough out on a lightly floured surface to about 1/2 inch thick. And yes, that will seem very thick. It almost filled my cookie cutter completely, but that's exactly what we're looking for here. So then I'm taking my gingerbread cookie cutter and cutting out our little cookies here and just re-rolling the scraps until it is all used up. So I'm just placing those on a parchment-lined baking sheet about 2 inches apart, and we want to bake them for about 10 to 12 minutes or until they're puffed and nice and set around the edges and golden. But while we are waiting for that, we are going to make our glaze. So I'm sifting 3 cups of powdered sugar into a large bowl. If you don't have a lot of lumps in your powdered sugar, you can just skip that step. And to that I am adding 1/3 cup of milk and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And you may need to add a little bit more milk depending on how thick this is. I ended up adding another tablespoon, but you want to do it in small amounts so it doesn't get too runny. But what we're looking for here is when you lift up the whisk, it should drizzle right off. Perfect. So then while the cookies are still hot, we're going to let them cool on the baking sheet for 5 minutes. And then we are going to dip them right into this glaze and place them on a wire rack so that they can drip and cool. And then what you get is that crackly donut glaze, and it's super sweet, and the cookies are just perfectly spiced and sweet. So it's a really great combination. I hope you enjoyed coming along with me on day 7 to make our soft and chewy gingerbread cookies. I really love anything gingerbread, but I'm a much bigger fan of the soft, chewy kind of gingerbread over the really thin, crispy kind. And these are just so perfect, and if you want to decorate them and make cute little smiley faces, you can do that as well. Thank you so much for watching to the end. I will have the playlist linked down below for the other cookie recipes so far, and we will see you the day after tomorrow with day 8. Thank you so much for watching. Bye! Hey everyone, welcome back to day 8 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies, and today we are making Alton Brown's chocolate peppermint pinwheel cookies. I have been making these for the last decade now. They are so amazing. We just love Alton Brown. That was actually me and my husband's first date. We saw him live for like a cooking comedy show. Now these cookies are a little bit more involved, but they are worth it, especially if you're looking for something a little bit different for a party or cookie exchange. In every bite you get a little bit of a nice soft cocoa cookie with a chewy peppermint sugar cookie, and the candy canes caramelize in there. Oh, they're amazing. So anyway, let's go get started. So we are going to start out by making the base sugar cookie dough here. So it's 1 cup of butter softened in the bowl of my stand mixer here and creaming it together with 1 cup of sugar. And then to that I'm going to add in 1 egg and 1 tablespoon of milk. And then we are going to slowly add in 3 cups of flour, 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt that I mixed on the side beforehand. So now we are going to divide the dough in half, and for the first half we are going to add in 3 ounces of unsweetened chocolate melted and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now this gets very messy. You definitely want a sheet of parchment paper or a Silipat mat and gloves, but we just want to knead that together, working the melted chocolate into the dough. And then we'll set that aside. I actually just tucked it away in its parchment paper. And then for our other dough, we are adding in 1 egg yolk, 1 teaspoon of peppermint extract, and a 1/2 cup of crushed candy canes. I believe I used about 4 candy canes and put them in my food processor until they were really fine. And then again, we just want to knead that all together. And then we just want to chill them for about 5 minutes just to let them set up a little bit. And then we are going to roll both of them out into a rectangle about 1/4 inch thick. And then we are going to place the peppermint dough on top of the chocolate dough. As you'll see here, I'm kind of trying to make it a similar shape. And then we just want to roll this into a pinwheel log. And then we want to wrap it in plastic wrap or parchment paper and refrigerate for at least 2 hours. So then I'm going to preheat the oven to 375 degrees. And we are going to cut the log into 1/2 inch slices and place the cookies 1 inch apart on a parchment lined baking sheet or greased baking sheet. And we're going to bake them for 12 to 13 minutes, rotating halfway through. And then we'll let them sit on the sheet pan for about 5 minutes and then move them to a wire rack to cool completely. Also, I just had to say, as I was cutting these and making them, my son kept calling them ear cookies, and now I can't unsee it. I really hope you enjoyed coming along and making Alton Brown's chocolate peppermint pinwheel cookies with me today. I know, again, they were a little bit more involved, but I'm trying to do a good mix of simple classic cookies as well as some unique ones. And I really hope you give them a try because they are definitely worth it. If you do give them a try, please leave me a comment and let me know what you think. I will have the playlist of the other cookie recipes linked down below, and thank you so much for watching to the end, and we will see you in the next one. Bye. So welcome back to day 9 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies, and today we are making my pecan snowballs, which was perfect because the day I made them, it was snowing outside. These little gems literally melt in your mouth. They are the perfect amount of sweetness and filled with toasty pecans and rolled in nice powdery sugar. These are truly addicting and the perfect addition to any Christmas cookie box. So let's go get started. So in my mini food processor here, I just have about 2 cups of pecans, and you just want to chop them up into small pieces. And then in the bowl of my stand mixer, I have 2 sticks of butter softened, and to that I'm adding 1/2 cup of confectioner's sugar and 1/3 cup of regular sugar, and just beating that until light and fluffy. And then you just want to scrape the sides and the bottom of the bowl. And then I'm adding in 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And we just want to give that a good mix again. And then I'm going to add in 2 1/4 cups of flour. And we just want to give that a good mix until it reaches like a shortbread consistency. And then we're going to stir in our pecans. And then we just want to chill the dough for about 30 minutes to an hour. You could also do it overnight. And then we want to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. And we are going to roll them into 1.5 tablespoon balls and place them on a parchment lined baking sheet about 1 inch apart. And bake them for 15 to 18 minutes or until they're nice and puffy and slightly golden. And then we want to cool them on the sheet pan for about 5 minutes. And then I have 1 cup of powdered sugar that I'm going to roll them in. You could also use a fine mesh strainer to dust all over the tops of them. And there you have it, my pecan snowballs. These are a classic, but they're super easy to make and they are so worth it. I always used to think they were kind of like an old-fashioned cookie and boring, but they are just so full of flavor and, as I said, melt in your mouth. They're really, really addicting and have become one of my favorites. I hope you enjoyed coming along and making them with me, and stay tuned for the day after tomorrow. We will be making day 10. I can't believe our 12 days of Christmas cookies is already almost over, but I've been really enjoying it and hope you have too. Thank you so much for watching until the end, and we will see you in the next one. Bye. Hey everyone, welcome back to day 10 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies. Today we are making my hot cocoa cookies. These are fudgy, chocolatey, super soft, and topped with toasty marshmallows. They are always one of the favorites in the cookie boxes that I give out, so let's go get started. So in the bowl of my stand mixer, I am combining 1 1/4 cups of brown sugar with 3 large eggs, and we just want to give that a good stir. And then in a separate bowl, I am combining 1 1/2 cups of flour, 1/4 cup of cocoa powder, 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder, and a teaspoon of salt. And we just want to give that a good mix and set it aside. And then I also have a 1/2 cup of butter that I melted with 12 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate. And I just did that in the microwave until it was nice and smooth, stirring every 15 seconds. So we just want to add that into our egg mixture and give that a good stir after it's cooled, of course. And then we'll add in our dry ingredients and give that a stir. Now this will be very, very fudgy and loose. Slightly thicker than a cake batter. It shouldn't be runny, but it's definitely a little softer than your typical dough. So we want to refrigerate that for at least 2 hours. Overnight is even better. And then we are going to roll these into 1 1/2 inch balls and place them about 2 inches apart. And then I have my oven preheated to 325 degrees. And we just want to bake these until they're about 10 to 11 minutes or until the tops start to crinkle a little bit. And then I'm going to add some chocolate to the top of each one. Now, usually I will use little squares of chocolate. I had mini chocolate chips and those worked just as well. So these are going to melt into the hot cookie, and then we're going to top them with a few mini marshmallows right into that chocolate as it's melting. And then we just want to throw these back into the oven for about 3 to 4 minutes or until the marshmallows become puffy and slightly melted and a little bit golden on top. And then I just leave those on the tray to cool for about 5 minutes before moving to a wire rack. I hope you enjoyed coming along and making my hot cocoa cookies with me. As I said, these are one of the cookies I make that everyone always asks for the recipe. They are just that perfect holiday feel and that great combination of marshmallows and chocolate. I really appreciate you all following along and watching until the end, and we will see you in the next one. Bye! Hey guys, welcome back to day 11 of my 12 days of Christmas cookies. Can you believe it's already almost over? Today we are making my linzer tarts. These babies I have been saving for close to the end because they are incredible. They always seem like they would be really complicated, but they're super easy to make. Really soft almond cookies filled with raspberry jam and topped with powdered sugar. They're not only beautiful, but sweet, tender, and flavorful. So let's go get started. So now in the bowl of my stand mixer, I am combining 1 cup of butter, softened, with a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And we just want to give that a good mix. And then I'm adding in 1 egg and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And again, we want to mix, scraping the bottom and sides of the bowl. And then I'm adding in 1 cup of almond flour or almond meal. You can also make that by pulsing some almonds in a food processor until they're fine. And then for my dry ingredients, I combined 2 1/2 cups of all-purpose flour with a 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, and just added that into the mix. And you just want to stir until that's combined, and then wrap these and refrigerate for at least 2 hours, if not overnight. So then I'm going to roll them out to about 1/8 of an inch thick, and I'm using my wreath cookie cutter for these. You could use really any circle shape you'd like. And then for half of the cookies, which are going to be our tops, I take the side of a piping tip to cut circles out of the center, and that's where we will see our beautiful raspberry jam popping through. And then we are just going to bake them at 350 degrees for about 8 to 10 minutes or until they are just slightly golden around the edges. And then we want to let them cool. And now I kind of goofed, it worked out fine, but normally what I would do is sprinkle confectioner's sugar all over the tops while they are on the baking sheet by themselves, and then fill them with raspberry jam and make the sandwich cookies. But this worked out just fine because I assembled the sandwich cookies with about 2 tablespoons of the jam in the center of each one, and then dusted powdered sugar all over the top, but then I just added an extra little dollop of raspberry jam in the center of each one, and it kind of worked out better, honestly. So whichever method you prefer will be great. And there you have it, my raspberry linzer tarts. These are actually my husband's favorite of all of the cookies, and he gets so excited every time I make them. As I said, they seem really involved, but they're really pretty simple and so worth it. They're so incredibly delicious. Thank you so much for coming along and making them with me, and for watching until the end, and we will see you in the next one. Bye. Hey guys, welcome to our final day of the 12 days of Christmas cookies. I saved the best for last. It's more nostalgic than anything, but my mom's sugar cookies. They were making these long before I was even born, but it is a tradition that we had every single year growing up, and still up until recently actually. And now it's something we all do with our own kids, and it's just really special. These ones come out perfectly crisp on the edges and super soft in the center, and then we're gonna make my mom's icing that you put on top and decorate. So let's go get started. In a bowl of my stand mixer, I'm creaming together 1 cup of softened butter with 1.5 cups of confectioner sugar. And then we want to add in 1 egg and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, along with 1/2 teaspoon of almond extract. And then we're going to add in 2.5 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of cream of tartar. If you do not have cream of tartar, which I did not either, you can use equal amounts of lemon juice, and that will work just fine. So we just want to make sure that's all mixed together, and then we are going to chill for 2 to 3 hours, if not overnight. And then we want to divide the dough in half and roll it out into about 1/8 of an inch thick and cut out the desired shapes. And then the oven is preheated to 375 degrees, and we are going to bake them for about 7 to 8 minutes or until lightly golden brown around the edges. And then leave them on the pan for 5 minutes before moving to a wire rack to cool completely. And now moving on to my mom's simple icing here. Now, I'll be honest, I don't really have measurements. This is kind of by eye, but I would say for each color I do about 1 cup of confectioner sugar, and then about 1 tablespoon of milk, and then the gel food coloring. It's really all about getting that right consistency. You don't want it to be too pasty and thick, but you also don't want it to be too runny that it's just draining off of the cookies. But luckily it's easy to fix. If it's too runny, add a little bit more sugar. If it's too thick, add a little bit more milk. And then we just want to decorate with our frosting and sprinkles, and then leave them to dry a little bit so the icing can set. And those are my mom's sugar cookies. I really hope you enjoyed coming along and making them with me. I really wanted to share them, not only because they are delicious, but it's a little piece of my family to yours that I can share with you. I'm really so grateful for you all following along with my 12 days of Christmas cookies. It was so much fun, and I'm so glad that you're enjoying the recipes. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.